Hello, Notre Dame fans. Welcome in. I am Ashton Pollard from blueandgold.com here with Tyler Horka. And Notre Dame wrapped up practice number 8 this morning. And while we were not allowed to view that practice that apparently was a scrimmage, we were able to talk with Marcus Freeman, Tommy Rees, and new starting quarterback Tyler Buchner, which we will get into in a second. But Notre Dame started fall practice 8 days ago now. So since it's been a little over a week, we thought that we would kind of go through and just do some takeaways, like a type of synopsis sort of video, since we didn't really have a practice report from this morning since we weren't in there. So we're going to go through and Tyler's going to give us his 5 biggest takeaways, things that stuck out to him, that sort of thing over the last 8 days. And we'll start with the big news of the day. Tyler, go ahead on the starting quarterback topic.
Yeah, this really isn't a surprise. It felt like a matter of when, not if. And truth be told, it only took, 7-8 days? I guess, like you said, this was the 8th practice. So just over a week, Notre Dame named its starting quarterback. It is Tyler Buchner. I think that's where this was trending all along. And that's exactly what Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees said. They said this wasn't a decision that was made over the course of 8 practices. This was a decision that was made over the course of really a year. These guys have been on campus together talking about Tyler Buchner and Drew Pine for a year and a half now. So everybody knew last year that when Jack Cohn came over from Wisconsin, he was going to be the starting quarterback for Notre Dame. But everybody also knew that it was probably either going to be Tyler Buchner or Drew Pine that was going to replace Jack Cohn. And in the end, it's Buchner. He played more than Pine last year. He showed more flashes than Pine. He had more opportunities. So I think that was big in just getting, his feet wet in college football. Everybody knows he's a supreme athlete. I think there's some things left to be desired, and not really his own fault with the arm. He just hasn't really had an opportunity to showcase it. This is that opportunity. I think he wouldn't have gotten this far to being named Notre Dame's quarterback if Tommy Rees didn't think that he could throw a really good ball and, throw every throw that has to be made on the field. The deep ball, the intermediate stuff, the short stuff. Tyler Buchner is a starting quarterback, like we said. Probably not a surprise, and really, to me, not that surprising that it only took about 8 days. All that said, Drew Pine is probably going to have a chance to play this year. I don't change my feeling on Drew Pine. I think everybody that is watching this knows that I really like him. I think he has a lot of moxie. You can't really coach that. You can't teach that. So if there is a situation where Notre Dame has to call on Drew Pine for that moxie, he's going to step up. We saw it a couple times last year. We might see it a couple times this year too.
Yeah, and I thought something telling that was brought up was that Marcus Freeman said that the person who was happiest for Tyler Buchner was Drew Pine, which is really a testament to his maturity, the closeness of that quarterback room. They've been talking about it, and obviously you're often going to hear, oh, they're close friends. You're not going to hear about sort of the rifts, but I think that this is legit, that they are very good friends. They hang out together. They golf together. They said that their girlfriends hang out together. So we'll move to the next one, staying on the offensive side of the ball. And that has to do with kind of the other big news today in the wide receiver room. Tyler, I'll let you elaborate on that.
Avery Davis has a torn ACL again, which is like, let's not even talk about what that does to the Notre Dame depth chart first. Yeah. That's just a terrible blow for a really good guy. A guy who came back for the 6th year because he wanted to have his best season yet in a Notre Dame football uniform. And he might have had it had he stayed healthy. I mean, now we can get into the Notre Dame wide receiver room. It was depleted before Davis went down with an ACL injury. He was going to have his opportunities. It looked like he was going to start. We walked into fall camp on August 5th for the first day, and Avery Davis was out there with the ones. So Not only is this bad for Avery Davis, it's bad for Notre Dame because they're losing a potential starter. And now you have 7 scholarship wide receivers. The good news was Marcus Freeman did say that Deion Colsey, who we saw a couple days ago with a brace on his knee, not practicing, it seems to be minor, just a PCL sprain. So he should be back maybe even within a week. And then Joe Wilkins Jr., who hasn't taken a live rep from what we've seen in the 5 or so practices that we've gotten to be out there for all camp. He hasn't been out there. He's been suited up. He's not wearing a red jersey, but he hasn't been out there running routes, catching balls, going against defensive backs. So Marcus Freeman said he might be able to play against Ohio State, and that would be huge just because Notre Dame needs anybody to play the position right now, because you don't have Avery Davis. You're relying on a freshman in Tobias Merriweather, who I hope you're ready, kid, because you're probably going to play at the Horseshoe on September 3rd.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I mean, you guys see it on the screen right there. The receiver situation is teetering on disastrous. Everybody knew going into this fall that Notre Dame couldn't afford an injury. And lo and behold, you get one in the first week of fall camp to a team captain, a six-year guy, a veteran guy that Notre Dame was really going to lean on. So the wide receivers have been talked about for months now. I mean, this goes back to last season and probably even before that with Notre Dame football. But I think this is kind of a tipping point for that room because never has it been this close to disaster, like we just said.
Yeah, exactly. And Marcus Freeman kind of added like he has confidence in the guys that are available, but even if Lorenzo Styles has a breakout year and is somehow a 1,000-yard receiver, he can't physically play every snap of every game. So you're gonna need him. And before it was kind of like, oh, you can maybe move him outside because Avery Davis will be in the slot, which is where Styles fits best. But now there is no Avery Davis, so there's going to be a lot of shuffling, and Marcus Freeman didn't offer any concrete solutions in terms of moving players around if they need to move someone over from the defense or how they're going to utilize their tight ends. That'll come soon, as this news just came last night. But yeah, it's it's quite the situation over there in that room. We'll switch over to the defensive side really quickly, where there's not a depth problem seemingly kind of anywhere, especially up front. So Tyler, what did you have on that topic?
Yeah, I think that's the story. As crazy as things have been with the offense, and we'll get some more craziness with the offense here in a second, the defense has been as advertised. It's solid. You know who's going to start up front. Like you said, in the front seven, it's set. You have Isaiah Foskey, you have Riley Mills, you have Jason Adamalola, and it's looking like Howard Cross is going to be your other defensive tackle. That's a really good group of four guys right there. And if it's not Howard Cross, then maybe it's Jacob Lacey, by the way, another senior who's been here and knows what he's doing, and you know what to expect from that player. With the linebacker group, we've harped on it over and over again. Maris Leofau, J.D. Bertrand, or Bo Bauer in the middle, Jack Kaiser at Rover. These are guys that have put the body of work out there. We know what they can do, not just in practices and not just leading some of these younger guys, but in games. We've seen all of those guys perform very well in games. And so if your biggest question defensively, like Marcus Freeman said today, is, oh no, who's going to start at the second safety spot opposite of Brandon Joseph? Is it going to be fifth-year senior DJ Brown, fifth-year senior Houston Griffith, or athletic freak Ramon Henderson, who everyone wants to see play that position, not just now, but in the future for Notre Dame? If that's your biggest question defensively, then I think Al Golden inherited a really good unit, a unit that's going to play really well. And from front to back has a bunch of guys who are not just talented, but like I said, experienced, and you know what to expect from them.
Yeah, absolutely. You ran through all the names, and we've gotten to talk with Al Golden and with Al Washington, the defensive line coach, and just the sheer quantity of players that they tout as being on the rise, I guess, like with Gabe Rubio inside Jason Onye. They're not going to start, but I think Al Washington feels really confident that he has some really good backups up there. I mean, Justin Adamalola, who in theory could be drafted, is a backup technically. Like that's wild. So we'll kind of switch back over. This is also on the veteran topic, I guess, but Jarrett Patterson moving from the center position out to guard. He has never played guard before. He has played center and he has played tackle, but he has not played guard. And that is a move made because Zeke Corral has emerged as one of the 5 best players on the offensive line. And that's what Notre Dame's goal has been this entire time, is get your 5 best on the field. We'll organize them however we need to from there, but let's get those 5 out there. So Tyler, what have you heard from Harry Hiestand, from Marcus Freeman, from Tommy Rees on that move and how that's been going?
Yeah, this feels like the second biggest matter of time type of thing on the offense. The first was Tyler Buckner starting at quarterback. The second was Jarrett Patterson eventually sliding over so Zeke Corral could get on the field, because we all know what happened with Zeke Corral last year at guard. It just didn't work out. And that's okay. Sometimes, that's a hard position to play. By the way, Kane Madden came in here from Marshall and was an All-American. And it turned out that it's a little harder to play guard at a place like Notre Dame because the standard is so high and everyone expects so much from the offensive line. So if this was the best way to get Zeke Corral, who is a very good center by all accounts, Harry Hiestand said the other day he's born to play center. I think he said he's built for it. His body is made for it.
Yeah.
Josh Lugg, Jarrett Patterson, all the offensive linemen that we talked to this week said there's just something about him at 6'3". He's one of the shorter offensive linemen, and he's, his arm length might not be the longest, which by the way, Harry Hiestand said doesn't really matter anyway. And in Zeke Correll's case, it might help him out because he's able to get to guys a little quicker and he's able to hit them in spots that, quite frankly, maybe some of these 6'6" centers aren't hitting them in terms of defensive linemen. So I think this was a win, not if, just because it's been floated around. Go back to last year. The same thing happened. Zeke Correll played center in the spring because Jarrett Patterson was injured. And then there was that question, is it going to happen in the fall? Brian Kelly kind of shut that down pretty quickly into fall camp. But this year, we reported it at blueandgold.com. I think it was in mid-July that it was going to happen. And then we showed up on the first day of camp, and it did happen. And the offensive line looks like it's really gelling. It's cohesive. And this was probably the right move.
Yeah, absolutely. And if Harry Hiestand's okay with it, I think we should all probably be okay with it.
Yes.
And then, so lastly, kind of our fifth takeaway, Tyler's fifth takeaway, has to do with the rookies. So we've seen a lot of the rookies. We've seen them play a lot of snaps. As Marcus Freeman said today, particularly at receiver, with some depth issues, you are going to have young guys step up. So Tyler, who has stuck out to you so far out of that class?
It's definitely the tight ends. And I say that plural. On day one, it was Eli Raritan. And I think you and I both were like, oh my goodness, how is this guy 18 years old, however old he is? I don't know. And also, by the way, how did this guy tear his ACL like 9 months ago?
Yeah.
Or maybe like 8 months ago.
It was like February. Yeah. So it might have even been 6. It's like 6, 7, somewhere in that area.
Ridiculous recovery on Eli Raritan's part. But he looks amazing. He looks like he could start obviously at tight end. That's his natural position. But with everything that's going on with the Notre Dame wide receivers, why don't you just flex him out a little bit, maybe even put him in the slot, let him go out anywhere where he can catch footballs because he's really good at it. I think Holden Stays is also a complete tight end. When you look at him, you're like, that guy can put his hand in the dirt and go block somebody. But then we watched one-on-ones the other day and he ran an awesome route and made an awesome catch. So those two guys are really good. I think they're going to play right away because of circumstances. Another guy who's going to play right away because of circumstances is Tobias Merriweather. And like those guys, he's not, physically imposing in the sense that he's a brick house, but he's a 6'4" wide receiver. And when you step out on the field, I'm 5'11", and I'm like, yeah, this guy's got a solid 5 inches on me. Maybe he's got more. He's really tall, really good hands. I think he's a really fast, quick twitch kind of a guy that can provide something that Notre Dame needs. Notre Dame doesn't have a lot of those taller, rangy, long wide receivers. So he's going to play. Deron Payne might play as a slot receiver. He kind of looks like one, to be honest with you. And
he was used that way in high school a fair amount too. I think that kind of flew under the radar because he was injured junior and senior year, or maybe it was a COVID thing. He didn't really have junior and senior years, but he was like used a lot as a slot receiver, and he has really good hands.
I think he's a really good athlete too. And he's the type of guy that you kind of flex out there and let him get the ball in space and do his thing. So there's 4 guys right there that I think could play right away as true freshmen. We don't really have time to get to the defense because Notre Dame has a ton of freshman defensive guys. But like we were saying earlier, I don't think we see as many of those guys because the defense is so veteran-led and there's a bunch of experienced guys who are quite frankly going to make them do the old-fashioned thing and wait their turn. And they might play as sophomores, but maybe junior year we're looking at some of those defensive guys. So a lot of talent on that side of the ball, but for the freshman's sake, we're probably not going to see that for a few years.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's veterans all over the board starting on defense, and you might see some flashes in late in games, not huge games, but I think by and large, when we look back at who redshirts, it's going to be primarily defensive players. So I don't know that these offensive players are going to have the chance to redshirt because they're going to be needed from day one. All right, perfect. Thank you for those 5 takeaways. We are all done here. Make sure that you head over to blueandgold.com. We have our $1 deal still running, and that gives you access to all of our premium content, plus our message board. That includes recruiting stuff. That includes every other sport under the sun, all that stuff. So make sure you sign up for that. That link is in the description of this video, and we will be back next week when we get to talk with a couple more coaches and some other players, and we kind of see how this depth chart shakes out as we approach September 3rd.